Hey, before we get started, we have so many new listeners that may not know about the larger intentional success community. If you want to meet and network with a great bunch of folks that are open to sharing new ideas, and you want to learn more about how to apply my business model for live event production companies, then join us at Jumpstart Your Sales Engine in Atlanta, April 3rd and 4th. We're going to focus on the selling side of your business so you can grow, make more money, and have a lot more fun. Learn more at trstimson.com/jumpstart.
In today's podcast episode, I'm going to go back to the time I first started using the word scalable as it applies to operations. Yeah, it's the Wayback Machine.
Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson.
So many years ago, when I first started doing presentations, doing keynotes, doing training sessions at events like InfoComm, I talked about what we called then rental and staging. Rental, we know what rental is. We come from the rental industry. We bought stuff. We rent it to people. They brought it back. Awesome business, right? Staging, and I don't know where the term came from, and I've never really liked it, but staging was the idea that you set a bunch of things up for the customer and then came back and took it away later. So I guess it was just rental plus delivery, and then sometimes we'd leave somebody there to make sure it all worked. So we were the rental and staging industry, and that's what ICIA, which was the precursor of Avixa, later InfoComm, called us. So when I was doing rental and staging presentations and writing articles for magazines, which were these paper things that came in the mail and piled up on your desk, we regularly used the term rental and staging, which no one outside of the AV industry understood. For those of us who came from the entertainment or theatrical side of the world, staging was what you walked on. That's what the actors walked on. So we were just a small community of people, very insular, didn't really know how the rest of the world did shows. But growing up in AV, you started to hear the term rental and staging, and I still see it out there. It's still out there, and it's unfortunate because I think it doesn't reflect what we do very well. However, it's got heritage, right? And I was there, so I guess I would know. Anyway, back to these presentations I used to do. And the first time I taught at InfoComm was probably 2001, 2002, something like that. And I came in and talked about what I thought were best practices for running a live event operation, which was really analogous to actually selling live events, because we really didn't have, salespeople the way that we would think of them right now. All the people who were selling were really well-qualified production managers who were putting together packages with equipment and labor to help do shows. And so it was the, kind of the precursor of the project management system, but highly specialized individuals to sell rental and staging. So a lot of the things that I was talking about then, and I was one of those people, that's how I sold, was, here are some of the best practices that we've learned in how to run the business and continue to sell the way that we were being taught how to sell. So I'm digging through my old slides. I'm always looking, reviewing my content. I've cranked out a lot of content, and sometime before I retire, I'm probably going to peek at it all and see what's there. But I came across this presentation that I was giving in 2007, and there's elements that go back, 5-6 years before that. But this was cutting edge stuff, right? I think I was presenting this at a large manufacturer's rental partner type of meeting, which was very common back then, back when rental partners were a great way to get your product out into the marketplace, show it was working, sell it into rental companies, sell it in installations, because we were the proving ground. It was great for a manufacturer to have a high-end event staging company on their user team, because we were the field. We were proof of concept. So these meetings were pretty nice. They were pretty posh. We had them at, nice resorts and ski places, and, in the Caribbean or Mexico somewhere, Cancun. Great events, great place to network and meet people. So this presentation, and I think here's the title of it, was called Feast or Famine, How to Make Money When Business is Unpredictable. Sound familiar? Okay. I'm going to walk you through some of this stuff because one, so much of it still applies, and I kind of giggle as I look through it today, right? So we're going to talk about the 3 biggest challenges in event staging and production and what to do about them. And problem number 1, get this, is when we are busy, we are too busy. When we are slow, we are too slow. Sound familiar? Yeah, this is us today. This is seasonality in a nutshell. So I talked about busy, how not to fix busy. These are the things that we were trying to do to fix busy that weren't working. Coming up with alternative revenue sources, playing pricing games in the slow season, doing aggressive cost controls during the slow season. This is that job cost mentality, right? And then dabbling in other things, getting into technology that was over your head, hoping that would bring you in more business. And all it really did was say, it just mean that when we were busy, we had one more thing to be busy with. So these weren't really good solutions, but these are things that people thought would help. My solution, and get this, was to have a scalable operation. I wanted you to have flexible bidding tools. I wanted you to have more value-added services. And back then, I didn't mean free. I meant you create more value, sell more services, or more things we could be doing for our customers, such as selling pre and post-event services, which was unheard of. We were a rental industry, rental plus labor. It starts at load in, it ends at load out. Selling anything before or after was, unheard of. So when I was talking about this is early 2007. So a scalable operation. Some of my tips for a scalable operation. Improve your efficiency. Well, duh, right? Packaging equipment. Well, for a rental industry, this was tough because if I put something in a rack in a system, I couldn't rent that item individually, and we were doing that all the time. Especially in video products and audio processing products, I need a time-based corrector. I can't have it tied up in a switcher package. Sometimes I need to send it out on its own. I need a parametric EQ. I need to send it out on its own. We're going to sub-rent it to someone else. So we were chasing rental revenue so hard that we couldn't imagine tying up equipment in racks. And as a result, when we're prepping major shows, we were building racks, or worse yet, sending a bunch of equipment out and stacking it up on a ballroom table. So packaging equipment was a scalable thing. And I talked about, I go into detail on these presentations of how that creates efficiencies, how that streamlines your warehouse operations, how it makes the crew more confident about what they're going to get, improves consistently, make sure that we have the right capabilities. All things that make perfect sense, but at the time were kind of crazy ideas. Another crazy idea, as I said, you needed to have twice as much cable and accessories as you owned equipment. And my formula, and I still say it today, is that imagine yourself the busiest day of the year, all of your equipment is out. How much gear, how much cable and glue items, GAC, as I often call it, is left in your warehouse? How many shows could you put together if you had more equipment? And if the answer is none, and we started running out of cable at the third show, okay, you don't have enough cable. You don't have enough stuff. So you need to own more cable and accessories so that when you sub-rent, you've got the stuff to support it. If you have an extra show, you don't have to rely on somebody else's cable to make it work, things like that. And the third thing I talked about in scalable operations is, get this, get the technicians out of the warehouse. It is still the most inefficient, expensive thing I've ever seen in all of my years of doing this. Technicians in the warehouse prepping orders is a horrible economic flaw in our business model. If you think you need the mindset and the skills and the experience of those technicians to prep an order, okay, you don't actually have an operation. You haven't learned anything from your people. You're completely reliant on what I call the hero syndrome. Somebody's got to swoop in and save the day. In other words, you haven't learned anything or taught yourself anything with all your experience. So techs are a very expensive way to do something that is really not that hard once you document it, once you put your packages together, once you train a few people. Trust me, it works. I've been saying it for over 20 years, and I'm going to continue to say it. Now, I talked about flexible bidding tools. we were so rental focused that we didn't want to commit we would commit inventory when we wrote the quote. The standard practice was you'd write an order in what was called heavy pencil. It would reserve the equipment as you were writing it until you got the job. And if somebody else was trying to write an order, they would say, well, the gear's not available. Where is it? Well, it's on their job. It's in heavy pencil. Well, can I override that? Can I take it off of their job and put it on my job? Neither job is confirmed. And we were spending tons of time. My attitude was, look, bid generically whenever you can and overbook, right? Oversell. Sell like you have a bottomless pit of equipment. And trust me, in this era, we did. It was no trouble finding more gear. We had well-developed sub-rental systems by that time. There was way more inventory out there than anybody ever needed. You just needed to sell the show. But if you sold specific items, you were going to run out. Quote generically, okay? It doesn't have to be a Sony XYZ ABC projector. It could be a 5,000 lumen LCD projector, right? We could be generic in a lot of things that we were doing. People were always the restraining factor, right? If you run out of people, which often happens before you run out of equipment, you're done. You can't sell anymore, right? So we always need to have more people. Oh yeah, the sales order does not have to equal the operational order. This is still a battle. This is still a battle today. You know, operations wants the sale to look like the thing they're going to prep. But now we talk about scrubbing orders. Now we start to understand that we can sell this and then send what it takes to fulfill it. And if we sell in customer terms, we're going to have to convert it into some sort of an operational order so we can prep the job. So we've gotten more sophisticated about that, and I think our rental software has kept up with us finally on that as well. Now, these value-added services, at the time, it was common practice to not charge for project management. And matter of fact, people would put it on their website. Project management is free. Every job is provided a project manager. Well, it's funny because every job needed a project manager because otherwise the order wouldn't get out the door because somebody had to hand walk everything through to make sure it got taken care of because we were using project management in lieu of process. Sound familiar, right? But we were avoiding things like hiring a graphics operator with computers to support the job or, reaching out to a teleprompter company and adding them to the order. Interpretation services, webcasting, IT networks, all these things that we were doing on a regular basis, we were letting the customer go hire that direct instead of providing it and making it a profit center for ourselves, particularly if it happened before the show. If it was pre-production, if it had anything to do with content, whether content delivered to the audience or content that was going to be delivered after the show was over, we were afraid to touch it. When in fact, huge amounts of value there and well within our skill sets. So again, 2006, 2007 here. So I started talking about, doing creative, doing video production, helping with scripting, which used to be a thing. People didn't used to speak extemporaneously like many of us do now. Post-show, you could, post streaming videos, do presenter attendee surveys, deliver transcripts. Again, not the stuff that the show people wanted to do. So it was all kind of icky. Ooh, who wants to do that? Who's going to do that? But the fact is, our customers were paying someone else to do that for them. Why weren't they paying us? Now, that was problem number one. How do you deal with the seasonality of the business? Here's problem number two. Okay. This is going to sound familiar. Labor costs are killing us, whether we are busy or slow. Now, I want to put this in perspective. In the early 2000s, I was still probably, we were selling, stagehands, incidental labor, show support labor, probably $50, $60 an hour. We were paying $30 or $35 an hour going through a staffing company. We were paying $20 to $25 if we hired them directly. Our technicians were making on the low end $350 a day, on the high end probably $500, maybe even $600 a day occasionally. Our labor costs weren't very high. Matter of fact, they're not that different from what we see today in some markets. However, we were passing them through because rental and staging, we were charging for the rental and the incidental labor it took to put it all together. So labor costs are always a big deal. Here's how you don't fix labor costs, by the way. You don't try to eliminate outside labor costs. That does not fix the problem. That just pushes everything into overhead, right? This is what I'm telling people, though, 20 years ago. Maximizing staff utilization. In this era, I ran into staff technicians who were working 300 plus days a year, whose total overtime pay for the entire year exceeded their base pay. It was an incredibly false economy that we were saving money by maximizing our staff utilization, because every job they were on was on overtime. And when they were in the warehouse prepping gears, they were creating overtime, right? So they may not have been on overtime on Tuesday morning, but that show they did Thursday through Sunday was on overtime. So we would rely on staffing pools, but staffing pools back then didn't have a lot of higher end talent. If you wanted a good freelancer, a good videographer, or video director, or audio engineer, you probably had to work with them independently. And you can't just lay everyone off in the slow months, though there were still companies that would do furlough summers. And, if summer was slow, you'd furlough everybody for a couple of months, kind of like a teaching contract, right? You might pay them year round, but they're not going to work over the summer. So the solution, of course, was, develop a freelance pool that was as good or better than your own staff. And that better thing got people's backs up. I tell you what, everybody believed that their technicians were the best available. That's why they hired them. That's why they were on the team. That's what they were telling their clients. And I'm coming from a world where, while we had great staff technicians, we all knew that we had freelancers who knew more. Okay. And the reason they were so good is because they had so much experience. They worked with so many companies. There's a lot of great talent out there if you know how to find them and know how to work with them. So the solution was optimize your staffing for your median revenue levels. So in the seasonal year, I said, don't staff for your slow months or your busy months, staff for the months in the middle, which was typically 6 or 7 months. Now today, I tell you, don't even do that. I mean, don't even staff for your slow months because it's still not full-time work. And I talked about booking farther ahead, which was people didn't like to do with freelancers. But we had a small pool of freelancers, right? We had a very tight labor market. We had poorly trained applicants coming into the system. People complained about not having any freelancer loyalty. Well, yeah, because you didn't give them enough work. You actually didn't pay them. You didn't want to train them. You resented them being on the job. Yeah, it wasn't an attractive business to freelance in. Trust me, I freelanced for a long time. It was like, you had to find companies that actually appreciated what you do. And it wasn't always easy. Now, how not to fix this labor cost problem? Restrictive freelance policies. We don't pay for parking. Things like that. Find out, where's the secret good technician hiding place? There is no hiding place. Okay, they're hiding from you, but they're not going to tell you where they are, right? And then waiting to the last minute to book is not going to solve any problems at all, because you're down to whatever's left in the labor market. This is just common sense. However, it is what the standard practice was at the time. So people would also say, hey, we've got a bad labor market, and arguably they did, but I always told them it was their fault, right? You can fix a difficult labor market if you do. And these are people in major cities, right? A top 10 city saying, well, we don't have a freelancer pool. Great, fix it. Take control of it. Be attractive to skilled technicians. Train people up. They're out there. They just don't know that you exist. And there are people who would be good if you would take the time to grow them. And yes, they're going to work for other people. You need to get over that, okay? Because that's how this industry works. So free, no obligation training, help them with schedule management, book them early, keep your commitments. If you have to cancel on something, give them some other work, right? Keep them loyal to you, treat them well, and treat your staff technicians better, right? The technician's life is not easy. We got to give them special treatment. Now, the third thing in this presentation, this is going to blow your mind, too much of our business is last minute. Right, so we got the same three problems, all these years later as we had back then. 2 decades does not make much of a difference. So too much of our business is last minute because we're out of people, we're out of gear, we're out of cable, we're out of time. We were extremely inefficient. And here's how you don't fix it. You ready? Upcharges for last minute customers. We should charge people more for last minute orders, right? We should turn down work from good customers, which doesn't make a lot of sense because if you have a client, if they come to you for everything, you have to always say yes, right? Compromising quality. Well, yeah, we can do that for you, but it won't be as good, right? So none of these things really play well with the marketplace, particularly if you have a loyal clientele and you're very proud of the quality of work you do. So to deal with last minute, the first thing I told everybody was redefine last minute. Wow, Tom, I think you said that in the webinar last month. Yeah, I'm still saying it. Redefine last minute. This is a made up concept. Now, when somebody says, "Oh my God, we got another last minute order. This job's in 2 weeks," I'm going, we can do anything in 2 weeks. That's a huge amount of time to pull something together. So dealing with last minute is redefine it, first of all. Start making assumptions that things are going to happen earlier. In other words, you got to use your intellect. You got to use the history saying, hey, we better plan on this job happening so that we can get everything ready for it. We need to expect changes often. I saw so many companies who did everything they could to squash changes, right? As the client is getting closer and closer to the event, they're thinking more about it. We didn't prepare them enough for the things that they needed to pay attention to. So they're finding them and springing them on us at the last minute when we're the ones that should have told them that this was going to happen. So we need to expect changes because we weren't doing anything to prevent them. We need to close our jobs sooner, right? You got to create FOMO. You got to create financial incentives. But you have to increase operational and logistical flexibility, which means you need a deeper bench. You need more companies that you can outsource, more people you can find. So how do you prepare for a crunch, a time when you know you're going to be busy? And back when I was managing, it was a very seasonal industry, right? I mean, we knew which months from year to year we were going to be busy. There was like some months that would kind of flip, right? There were years that August was a super busy month, and then there was a decade when it wasn't. But we always knew that we were going to be busy January, February, March, April, May, probably June, September, October, maybe November. We knew when we were going to be busy. So we would hold back all of our staff technicians, or as many of them as we could, but we would get our key freelancers booked as early as possible. And then we would feather in the staff techs. We would ballast the crews on all the shows, right? We were quick to move people around. So here's your schedule for now. Don't tell anybody you're going to Florida because this is going to change, right? We wouldn't overskill a show because if we're balancing shows, we want to make sure that the skills followed all of the shows and relative to that team. So I didn't need a show that had 8 people on it who were best in class while I had other shows that were working on with less talent, right? I talked about, again, owning more cable than gear. You need at least 50% more, 2 to 1, to have that flexibility. It'll make it easier for you to deal with last minute busy and changes. Sell more generically to allow for easier subrentals, right? Don't manage inventory, manage the shortages. So much energy went into figuring out where our inventory was going to go that we didn't have time to deal with the inevitable shortages. So shortages were awful. We hated them. We can't do this job. We don't have any projectors. Yes, but we have the rest of the $50,000 order. Why don't we just subrent projectors? Well, we won't make any money. I mean, these are the conversations, and I still hear them today, by the way. So how do you make this work, right? What's the scalable solution? You know where I'm going to say, right? In order to make this work, dealing with last minute, you need centralized crew booking, centralized talent scheduling, right? You need crewing decisions, talent decisions based on company needs, not just on one show, right? We got to look at the entire package, all the jobs. We need centralized equipment flow. We don't need equipment flow that's managed by individual project managers for individual projects, and the project managers are trading with each other. We need one central desk that's managing equipment flow for the entire organization. Right? And we need the master plans for people, logistics, talent, equipment available to all operations, sales, technicians, and project managers. We need a transparent system, and we need that one source of truth so that anybody can look into the system, understand what the plan is, what's been going on, so that when we make a change, we know what it affects. So the irony here is, last minute business is normal. Process and planning is supersedes and fixes busy, and you need to approach staffing and talent more professionally because it is hypercritical to your business. So not a lot has changed. How I talk about it may have evolved a little bit. I put all of it together in a bigger model now, and I talk about balance, and I talk about selling and planning and administration, which is the maturation of all the things that I've been talking about for almost 2 decades. It's a improvement over what I figured out over the 15 years that I was managing the company, and the experience that I got from the 10 years of being a freelancer before that. Right. So my takeaways for you all these years in advance, my takeaways from the past are: 1, be the best bidder, not the lowest bidder, right? The low bid's going to get thrown out anyway. Be the best bidder, show the most value. Conclusion number 2 was make sales and operations accountable to each other. And in the balance model, they absolutely are, right? Selling and planning are intertwined. We are better at selling because we are better at planning, and the information goes both ways. We're better at planning because we're better at selling, right? And then the third thing is that packages protect your bottom line while favoring the customer, right? Do the right thing for the customer. Everything else will take care of itself. So there's my blast from the past, which really sounds like, this is me sitting in somebody's boardroom last week explaining to their team how we're going to make their company work better, reduce the stress, improve profitability, make planning work, okay, win and retain better customers, all the things that we talk about now. The concepts have been around for a while. Well, I'm more focused about them, but the truths really haven't changed. We just have more examples of why they're true. So there you go. Thanks for listening. I'm having fun trolling around in the past on my earlier presentations and finding the continuity in it. If you remember something that I talked about years ago and want me to talk about what is the state of that today, send it to me. I'd love to be reminded of those things. Even if I was completely off base, I'd be happy to speak to it. Thanks for listening, everyone.
If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimson.com for more information.